appreciating the leadership of this chapter of Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship, for having me with you, for inviting me. It's always a honor to be in your midst. And I appreciate the great work that you're doing, bringing a lot of value to everyone that cares to join. I wish you all the very best, and I pray that you get your reward on earth and in heaven. It's a pleasure to be here again. This evening's topic, because this thing moves so fast, is thriving with emotional intelligence in difficult times. And the question is, why emotional intelligence? And I'm going to pose one or two things theoretically as we move ahead. Ever wondered why average, sometimes, a lot of times, average academic performers, people that were not perhaps at the excellent cadre in academics in school, why sometimes they excel in real life? Or why some people are so financially successful but are frustrated in personal life? Why some people, sometimes they seem to have achieved all that the world decides is success. And yet, after getting all these things, some of them will confess that they feel lost, they feel frustrated, and some will give up everything they've got, and they'll start seeking for meaning in life. And this points us quickly to what we call emotional intelligence. I'm not going to go into the spiritual aspect of life now. That is not my call this evening, but the emotional aspect of life. We're looking at thriving with emotional intelligence in difficult times. The human brain has a logical and emotional side to it. For a long time, it was assumed that you are either logical or emotional. But the truth is, we are both. Leaning wholly on one aspect could be disastrous. So I don't want to go to gender now, but it's often said that a particular gender tends to be more logical, and they flounder when it comes to understanding emotions and leveraging on emotions. Or they assume that emotions makes you weak, which is wrong. Then another gender tends to be more emotional. And sometimes we are not careful. Being emotional doesn't make you emotionally intelligent. They're absolutely two different things entirely. A person could be emotional, and in the grammar that we speak, in the English grammar, that could be being excessive when it comes to using one's emotions. Being emotionally intelligent means I acknowledge my emotions, I know the power and the relevance of my emotions, and I can use the power of reason to collaborate and utilize my emotions. In fact, I often like to summarize emotional intelligence as the power of reason over emotions, using both synergistically to create value, to create meaning in life. We'll break it down further as we go ahead. I describe so that we can have a better Wikipedia as the capability of our own emotions and those of others to discern between different feelings and label them appropriately. It is to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior and manage or adjust emotions to adapt to the environment or achieve one's goals. So our emotions are not a hindrance, but an advantage. Inherently, human beings are both logical and emotional beings. Now, the thing is this, our background and schooling focused on the logical aspect. Our background and our schooling globally focused on the logical aspect. We studied mathematics, we studied physics, economics, and all those things. They focused on the logical aspect. And they failed to introduce us to systematically manage the emotional aspect. And so some people were lucky. They grew up in an environment where there were balanced emotions. They were lucky. It was not systematic. Those that lacked such an opportunity grew up being very intelligent, being very logical, but frustrated in certain areas because they never discovered the superpower of their emotions. And whether you recognize it or not, your emotions are there and they are driving you. Your emotions affect how we think, how stressed or not we are, how we manage other people, how we relate with other people. It affects so many things. It's a superpower that cannot be ignored, and which, when it's not controlled, can be used against us. And this has happened to so many people. A person seems to be at the zenith of their life. All of a sudden, they commit suicide, and people wonder why. Something was wrong emotionally, deep down in the subconscious. Okay, let's move ahead because I'm very conscious that this is just an introductory session. Ordinarily, when we conduct this kind of training for some organizations, it takes 3 days, 2 days, a full day. A mini package is a half day. A 45-minute session will be insightful and will gain things. Individuals will pick something here or the other, but really it's purely introductory. What are signs that a person lacks emotional intelligence? One, they will have poor self-awareness. That is a poor understanding of self. And oftentimes, a person feels, oh, this is who I am. I know myself. But what they are referring to is the product of who they've become, not who they choose to be. I'll explain. Product of who they have become based on the environment they grew up in, the family they were born to, the strong influences on their life. So a person grows up in a home where negative example a lot. The father beats the mother. And in that society, masculinity wrong is asserting yourself physically. So that person assumes and grows up that this is the way to do it. And I've seen men in suits whom, when they get really intense, they lash out. Or women in skirts, suit skirts, very good English, when they are intensely emotional, they lash out, either physically or verbally. So there's poor self-awareness because this person will say, this is who I am. And truly, that's not who they are. That is whom they have learned to be, whom they have been programmed by the environment to be. The influences they have acquired and picked up on their journey, unconsciously, without a filter, because a lot of these things happen in early life. No filter. That's how God made me. I'm angry. I'm always angry easily. Self-awareness is discovering that this is whom I've become based on my exposure. But now I can make deliberate choices. And I'm not joking here. I've seen this happen. I've been coaching people. I've been a counselor, both in the corporate world and the people facing it's doable. Self-awareness is working on certain competencies and developing the personality that I want to be. It doesn't matter where I'm coming from or where I've been in the past. Self-awareness. Another sign that there's lack of emotional intelligence is a lack of empathy. I call empathy the human connection. A person that lacks empathy is not able to connect easily with others. So sometimes they feel isolated. Sometimes they see other people as tools to achieve their targets. That's when they are leaders. And so they tend to focus to be good at managing, but not at leading. They focus on objectives, what you want to achieve, but they're not good at developing and enhancing people. But a person with strong empathy, positive empathy, not the weak one that people think empathy is. I can't go there now. will tend to be good at developing people. And in developing people, they create people that achieve the objectives so they don't lose. But a purely managerial style person will focus on achieving things and not on people. And that way, people around them feel used, abused, and dumped. And they wonder why. And they say, we are here to do this work. The work, the things are often more important to them than the people. Lack of empathy. They have difficulty in building and managing relationships. They may love you, but they can't relate well with you for long. They have the inability to regulate self. And this often leads to burnout. It leads to mood swings. They could be pretty sweet. I've handled situations where they say, oh, he's a very nice person. Then all of a sudden, it becomes this very horrible person. Oh, she's a very nice person. Then all of a sudden, she becomes this very horrible person. Lack of balance is a clear sign of a lack of emotional intelligence. Some further signs that a person lacks emotional intelligence. Number one, you are easily stressed. Medical experts will tell us that most of stress, most times we are stressed, it has to do with emotional reasons rather than physical reasons. Emotional reasons. You can Google this or speak with a medical expert, your doctor, because a person that is emotionally balanced may go through what you've gone through and they'll be calm because they've learned how to regulate themselves and manage pressure. A person that is not emotionally balanced will absorb everything and react negatively and feel very stressed. Number two, you hold grudges and find it difficult to forgive. Sign of lack of emotional intelligence. Number three, inability to assert oneself without being aggressive. And there are two different things. Being aggressive, being assertive, two different things. Many people that lack emotional intelligence, in the bid to be assertive, they become aggressive. An aggressive person asserts themselves and to the detriment of others. But a purely assertive person, they can speak, they can assert themselves, they can be who they want to be, but they have a consideration for others. They don't feel I have to step on others' toes to be myself. But an aggressive person feels, for me to succeed and to be myself, I need definitely to step on toes. They do it as a matter of necessity. Number four, you often feel misunderstood. You just often feel that people don't understand me. I don't know why people don't understand me. It's a sign that the person needs to develop certain competencies in emotional intelligence. You sometimes feel lost and purposeless despite all you've achieved. Clear sign. Inability to regulate your emotions, or the alternative is to bottle them up, and that is not regulation. That is not regulation. Because when you bottle them up, you choke, and eventually you explode, or you transfer it to a weak person that can stand up to you. That is not emotional regulation. Then you don't know your own triggers. Clear sign. You are often defensive when in error. Clear sign. You blame others for how they make you feel. You don't take responsibility. It's always the fault of others for making you feel the way you do. Clear sign that a person needs to work on their emotional intelligence. I'm rushing because of time, and I hope that the rushing pays off so that at the end, probably we can take a few questions here and there. Emotional intelligence, unleashing your superpower, particularly in the VUCA environment. One of the earlier speakers mentioned the VUCA environment. The VUCA environment is what the experts describe the environment we are in, both the economic environment, the security environment, the social environment. They've been termed as VUCA. What does VUCA, VUCA, stand for? I know that most of us know this, but a quick summary for those that may not be so familiar with it. Experts decided, after studying many things some years back, that the environment was volatile. It is explosive. You can hardly control it, both economically, security-wise, and so many other things. It is uncertain, V volatile, U uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty. Too many factors erupting, things changing so fast. There's uncertainty. Organizations are not planning 5, 10-year visions anymore. They are planning 1, 2, 3 year vision, even 6 months. Even when they have the 10-year vision, they are working with 1 year goals, 2 year, 3 years. Because the 3 year vision you have, the parameters upon which that vision was based could have so changed within a year that that vision that is totally irrelevant or not so relevant as you thought it was. So we work with short-term goals, complexity. There are so many factors that bear on each other, ambiguity. You can hardly pinpoint what real issues are sometimes. And so you have to do like a doctor that sometimes uses what they call, puts a person under a battery of antibiotics that hopefully one of them will hit this thing, because it seems as if there are many things at work here. It is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. How does emotional intelligence help us? Number one, competencies in emotional intelligence will help you feel centered or grounded, no matter how complex the environment appears. And this is why, even during the lockdown, the COVID-19 lockdown, when the whole world was chaotic and many people lost their being, they didn't know what to do, there were few individuals that still remained centered and calm. And it always happens. Somehow, they are not sure what will happen tomorrow, but they know who they are. They understand that we will move on. They understand that some will take control, that in this complexity and chaos, some order will emerge. While many are falling, some will find opportunities and rise. So they remain centered, because and being centered comes first from within you and not from without. Not from without. From within. From within. These are people that are focused, curious, people with emotional intelligence, and they hold on to what is important. They don't misprioritize and chase what the whole world is chasing. There's a new pain, there's a new fashion, there's a new emphasis, there's a new burden. Everyone is rushing here, everyone is concerned, everyone is suddenly breathless. They are not carried away. Things may not work the way they want, they may be hurt a little, but they're able to withdraw, gather strength, and move on. They are focused on what is essential in life. They have the ability to absorb and rise above pressure. It doesn't break them easily. They are open-minded and adaptable, which is very critical in the VUCA environment. Being open-minded and adaptable. They want what others want, but sometimes when they don't get it, they just forgive and move on, and they don't even hold it against you. They're like, well, we can't all be friends. Well, everybody, some people complain in organizations, see there's a clique. Listen, the truth, we may not like it when the clique doesn't work for us. There will always be cliques. Everybody can like each other equally. Some people will just like each other more. It happens. You just move on. Find where you belong. Don't be busy bothering yourself that there's a clique somewhere. Find your own clique. Create your own. They are open-minded. They are adaptable to situations. They move on with life. They are authentic because they've discovered who they are and they've discovered the values they stand for. So they can be sincere and authentic. They don't need to play games anymore. They are beyond that. And then they have empathy, which are called the human connection. Having empathy and connecting with others without being manipulated. I hope I'm able to speak a little bit on empathy, because most people misunderstand empathy. They focus on what you call emotional empathy, which opens you up to being manipulated by others. And no wonder they see empathy as a weak virtue, a seemingly good thing, theoretically, be empathetic. But look, I don't want to appear weak or be used. And that's because we focus on the wrong aspect of empathy. There's a way that society uses a word that is quite different from how the experts use it. So when we talk about empathy, we have three types of empathy. We have the emotional empathy. which lends itself to being abused, no control. And then there's cognitive empathy, the ability to understand and relate with others and manage them. Cognitive empathy. It is more mental in nature. And then there is compassionate empathy, which is a combination of the cognitive, the mental empathy, and the emotional, that's the heartfelt empathy. So a person with compassionate empathy can understand where you're coming from, see what is going on, mentally, and then make a balanced choice what to do. They still have some compassion enough to want to do something to help you if they can. And believe you me, in leadership, that help may be tough. It may not always be what you want. And they can see clearly. Compassionate empathy. The question then is, going to the crux of the matter, how do we develop some of these emotional competencies? I've picked a few. We can't really touch on all. And in fact, the few we are speaking on, we cannot x-ray them in depth, but we will give a brief and create some understanding, which, believe me, can be very useful, and which one can also develop at a later time. By the way, some benefits of emotional intelligence, no wonder corporate organizations are, encouraging their teams, and particularly leaders and would-be leaders, to get into it. One, it helps you maximize your leadership abilities. In 1995, Daniel Goleman, regarded as the modern father of emotional intelligence, so to speak, published his book, Emotional Intelligence, and that's what popularized it. It's been there. It's always been there for hundreds of years. Psychologists have known about it. But what he did that brought it to the attention of the world was he did a research to find out what's the relevance of emotional intelligence to the business world. We know the power of it to us as human beings, but what are the advantages and the relevance in the business community? So Daniel Goleman, along with some of his associates, went around different countries, different industries, and they created scientific parameters and measured many leaders. And they came to the conclusion that between 65 to 80 something percent of the most effective and productive leaders globally were people that were high in emotional intelligence, whether they recognized it as emotional intelligence or not, which as at that time most did not. People that were able to win the trust of others, connect with others at a deeper level, inspire confidence, people that seemed grounded and centered, people that communicated with empathy and clarity, people that had different tools to use to lead, not just authority alone, but they knew when to switch. They were adaptive. They knew when to be democratic, when to be laissez-faire, when to be this, when to be that. They practiced what we call situational leadership. That is being knowing the kind of leadership style to adopt depending on the kind of people I'm leading and the situation I'm leading. One style will not work in every situation. So before we had those basic leadership styles, but then later on, I think in late 60s, early 70s, two behavioral experts came up with the situational leadership model that says, look, one style will not always work. Sometimes it gives you results, sometimes it leads to frustration because situations change and people change. You must be flexible as a leader, understanding the people you are leading and the situation you are in, and knowing which leadership style to adapt at that point in time. So they came up with a situational leadership model. Emotional intelligence will equip you to do this effectively. They're better at decision making because they can see things clearly and regulate their emotions. They don't let it interfere unconsciously. They have improved communication skills. They are better at relationship management, very excellent when it comes to customer service, relationship management in organizations, and so on and so forth. They're good at stress management. They're very good at conflict resolution. These are just a few of the benefits of emotional intelligence. Believe you me, if you say emotional intelligence is life, it's not far-fetched. It's not far-fetched. What are some key competencies we must develop within the next few minutes? I've picked 3 critical ones. You can't talk about emotional intelligence without talking about self-awareness. It all starts with self-awareness. Self-awareness is understanding why I am the way I am, not concluding that this is how God made me. No, sir, I'm not. But why am I this person that I am? The positives and the negatives. How did I get here? Oh, the choices I made, the environment I grew up in, the influences I was exposed to, and the choices I made, consciously or unconsciously. Ben Carson, in one of his books, spoke about a doctor, an excellent character that died and it pained him. And that doctor grew up in the hood, a very rough environment, where his father was gone, his mother was into drugs, his brothers all bowed to the environmental influence and stole and were into drugs. But somehow he saw something beyond that environment and chose to be academic, to excel, to be a gentleman. So 2 different people can be in the same environment and somehow something triggers an influence in them and they turn out differently. Self-awareness is discovering who I have been and why I have been like that. And then making a mature choice as to who I want to be. Not limiting myself and saying, this is where I am. In other words, I can't change. And don't expect me to be better. There's a ceiling on my growth. I can grow financially, I can grow mentally, but I've refused to grow emotionally. I'm saying this because this happens to many adults and it's not your fault. Most of us were not exposed to these things early in life. Developing self-awareness is recognizing that I can actually improve on many things and deliberately seek knowledge in these areas where society failed me for many years. How do you develop self-awareness? Number 1, be reflective. Be reflective. If you don't reflect and study yourself, observe patterns, it's going to be difficult to change. Somebody was working in Port Harcourt and he said, people says, is this is selfish, he gets angry, he's a leader. No, he doesn't really agree. That's not him. And then it comes to Lagos and he gets the same feedback from people in the place he works. And he says, no, they ganged up against him because in his mind, he has an impression of whom he believes he is. Then in his neighborhood, he starts getting the same feedback. And I sat him down and I said, if you look at it, the people in Port Harcourt, and I knew this from your speaking, I never knew them. You told me, said this. The people in Lagos, the company where you work, said it. In your neighborhood, they say. Do you think all these people all over Nigeria had a meeting one night and decided to be saying this about you when you were not aware? It simply means who you think you are is not whom you are projecting to the world. When you reflect and observe patterns, you observe that I always behave like this in this situation. You note it down. You must have a journal. You keep down something. You say, why do I always behave like this? Why am I always triggered when I see something like this? That means I lose control of who I am to this situation or to this kind of thing. I want to gain control back. Let me study about this. Let me speak with a counselor or let me study. There are many free resources online on Udemy, on LinkedIn Learning, and then you understand why this happens and you learn how to gain control and be who you want to be and not who your environment and certain situations make you to be. Be reflective, look back, study, look out for patterns, behavioral patterns, how you respond to certain things, why certain things trigger you. Note them down. You will learn something from that process. Be reflective. This is very key for all mature people and leaders. If you don't reflect, you're stumbling around in life. Number 2, remove self-deception. I said that gentleman felt I am this person, but people are always giving him feedback that this is who you are. And as far as it's concerned, they all ganged up against me. How can different people that don't know themselves gang up against you. It's time to remove self-deception and be honest. I may think that this is where I am, but this is whom I project to the world. As a mature person, can I sit down and take the bull by the horns? How do I change what I project? Because what I project is coming from deep within me. It has bypassed my subconscious mind, determining my results. My mental mind tells me that my conscious and mental mind tells me that this is where I am. Technically, this is who I say I am, but there's a strong force within. And psychologists would tell you that your subconscious is about 80% of who you are. Your conscious, maybe even 90%, 90. Your conscious mind is just 10%. And so if you are not in control of your subconscious to some extent and learning from it and exposing it and taking grasp of it, you'll be doing things that you wonder, why did I do that? How did that happen? How did I project this? Because whom you think you are is a dissonance with whom you really are. Remove self-deception. Come to terms with the reality of whom you are projecting and begin to take control of it. Number 3, seek feedback. No one can really grow without this. Leaders in the workplace, team members in the workplace, husbands at home, wives at home, children. For many reasons, many people fear feedback. Maturity is learning to take feedback and using it for personal growth. Of course, we know that many times people don't give feedback in a pleasant way. But I'm telling you, maturity is ignoring how they deliver the feedback. You just taking the points and the feedback and say, okay, I'm going to work on this. This is where they think I am. This is who they think I am. I'm going to work on myself. Next time they see me, I'm a better person. So if they are stuck in my past, let them be stuck there. At least I am not stuck there. Because some people will look at you and say, oh, you are daft or you dress poorly. And if you take that thing and work on it and transform it, they fixed who they think you are in their minds. Please don't be limited to who people think you are. Quickly move forward. Use their feedback to develop yourself. Somebody said there's an ancient proverb that says something like, when people cast stones at you, supposedly to destroy you, gather those stones and use it to build yourself a castle. In other words, the feedback that people throw at you negatively to hurt you, to injure you, gather them, work on the realities within them, ignore how they said it or their intention. Use the facts, develop yourself, and become a better version of who you are. Joseph said in the Bible, he said to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Unfortunately, he cooperated with God. I'm hoping that 1 or 2 persons from tonight will begin to cooperate with God for their lives. And number 4, be open to change. This is very, very important. When a person is not open to change, they begin to stultify. They begin to die, to decay. Because when change occurs, it leads to frustration, it leads to irritation, it leads to anger. Why can't things remain the way they are? And you know that this is not a factor of age. I've been privileged to know people in their 80s and their 90s that are still evolving, that are learning to use laptops and smartphones. I can't go into story now. I've met quite a couple of them. And the world is changing. There are many people in their 60s and their 70s now still learning. So if a person is still stuck in that past of I'm too old to change, or I've mastered certain things, so this change would disrupt my mastery, I'm not adapting to it. That's a recipe for failure, because whether you adapt or not, the world will move. So be open to change. I'm not saying adopt every change, but be open-minded, critically examine it and make your choices. Not every change is positive, but there's no growth without change. Not every change will lead to growth. However, there's no growth without some change. Be open to change. That's developing self-awareness. The second one that I felt is so important is developing self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to manage myself, my emotions, my competencies, to manage myself to be the best version that I can be. to be productive physically, mentally, and emotionally. Self-management. In some schools of emotional intelligence, they call it self-management, and they embed emotional regulation, all manner of things into it. Some schools will call it self-regulation. Whichever one you choose, we'll talk about the same basic competencies. For me to self-regulate, first of all, I've developed self-awareness. I know where I am. I know my triggers. I know that, let me look for something here now. No offense to Kwara people, but I like to use things that are peculiar to me so that others don't feel offended. I'm a Kwara man, and I've heard it when I was growing up. Some people are of the school that Kwara people are bush people. So if somebody gets offended by that, I know that when they say Kwara people are bush people, you get angry. And then people look at you that, oh, when you hear this, you get angry. So they know they have the recipe for frustrating you. And you know, the world is not a nice place. So when they want you to fail at a task, when you have a management presentation, somebody whispers that thing near you and you just hear it and you start boiling, and then you go in there and you can't be your best. They've learned your trigger and they use it against you. In life and in emotional intelligence, you want to know your triggers and ask yourself, why does this thing trigger me? Is this really me? No. So I don't care what they say. I don't care what they think. This will not work anymore. You nip off that trigger, work against it. Then hide your buttons. Don't be so predictable and readable to the whole world. And then, even if you have a trigger that you are still working on, learn to reverse it. Take, for instance, a person has short breath when they get angry and they breathe shallowly. One quick therapy to do is when that is coming, taking deep breaths to calm down yourself. Your body works with your mind, and your mind collaborates with your body. When you have anger and strong emotions, your body reflects it. And you are angry, your heart is beating fast. You are angry, your breath is short. So that shows that your body and your mind works together. Now you can use your body to reverse the feelings of your mind. How? Take, for instance, some unconscious things we do. When some of us are troubled, we go and pour water on our faces and on our necks. We take in deep breaths, you sit down under AC. And when your body calms down, what happens to your mind? You feel calm. That means you can actually use your body to regulate your mind. Now, you don't want to do this accidentally. You want to begin to do it deliberately. This was when I learned to take walks just to calm down myself, do some things physically. And the more I practiced those things, the more I got to the zone where it's so difficult to provoke me today. Because I've learned self-regulation, and I know that every time I lose it, I lose control and I get results that I don't want. Know what triggers you. Begin to work against it. Mentally take a step back and review situations. Step back and review the situation. Don't react. When you mentally take a step back, it gives you the ability to respond, to choose your response when you have the time. Do the opposite of how it makes you feel. Develop self-acceptance. You really can't regulate yourself if you haven't accepted yourself for who you are. Oh, I hate that I look like this. I feel inferior because of this height. I feel because I don't have this position, I didn't get that. When you don't accept yourself, you'll be easily triggered. You will easily fall under condemnation. And in fact, sometimes when people don't intend to hurt you, you'll be hurt because you will assume they are hurting you. So one way to have self-regulation is to develop self-acceptance. This is who I am presently. I love myself. I'm working to get better, but I accept who I am today. And one way of doing this I often do with people is I tell them, see, you focus too much on the negatives. Start listing out your positives, and everyone has them. It may seem like a child's exercise, but I challenge adults in the house. I've seen executives chop executive directors, managing directors, senior people, CEO list people do this as part of therapy, and it did wonders for them. List out your strong points, what people say you are good at, what you know you are good at, and focus on them. You see, negative self-talk can destroy a person in a very expensive suit when you don't accept yourself and easily fall under judgment. And so you react and go about life lashing out at different people, and then breakdown is around the corner. Develop self-acceptance. Work on accepting yourself and building your self-esteem. Then focus on what you can influence. I hope I can remember the serenity prayer. It's a very old one. You can Google serenity prayer. If somebody can type that in the chat box so that people can Google it later, serenity prayer. It says something like, Lord, help me to accept the things that I can't change. Help me to change the things that I can. Thank you, Jesus. Or is this serendipity? I think it's serenity. Help me to accept the things that I can't change. Help me to change the things that I can. And grant me the wisdom to know the difference, so that I'm not trying to change the things that I can't change, and I am not accepting the things that I can change. Most of frustration in life, thank you, I think somebody typed it there. Most of frustration in life comes from pouring so much emotion into things that you are powerless to change. God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you so much, Mr. Adedele. Thank you so much. Powerful, simple, but powerful. Many people in our society today are frustrated because every day they pour emotional energy into things that are beyond them. There are so many potholes on the road. Since the day you've been complaining about the potholes on the road, it hasn't changed any. Why do you still waste emotional energy on that? This government is useless. Wait until there's a place you can influence the government. If you can't, stop pouring emotional energy into it daily. It leads to frustration. I can't dwell on this, but focus on what you can influence and influence them. What you can't, leave it till that time you get there and you can influence. Then develop empathy. We can't talk about emotional intelligence without talking about empathy, because the whole of emotional intelligence really is categorized into 5 broad channels. 1, self-awareness, knowing myself. 2, self-regulation, managing myself. 3, self-motivation, motivating myself from within without waiting for encouragement or stimulus from outside. And so the first 3 categories or pillars or components or competencies deal with managing myself. Then when I've mastered myself, the next 2 competencies of emotional intelligence have to do with others. Developing empathy, the human connection, helps me understand others and know how to manage them. Then social skills, or what a school of emotional intelligence will call relationship management, how to actively relate and manage others. Empathy is the human connection. Typically, we like to say it is the ability to put ourselves in the emotional shoes of others. And I said earlier that there are 3 types of empathy. There's emotional empathy, where somebody easily catches the feeling of others, and they are so overwhelmed, they become weak and powerless to help the other. A person goes to a counselor and tells them their situation, which is really bad, and the counselor becomes so emotional. It's like, how can? And you become blinded. You lack the clarity to help them. I've even seen some cry with the other person. A doctor too strong in emotional empathy will lose a patient, and it's happened in some places, and they become weighed down. They go into alcohol, smoking. Some have committed suicide. That is an unhealthy dose of emotional empathy. It robs you of clarity. It makes you useless to the person you ought to help. And no wonder many leaders see empathy as a weakness that opens them up to being manipulated, because they're focusing on the wrong type of empathy. So I've described cognitive empathy, cognitive, COGNITVE, which you want to study on, and compassionate empathy. How do you develop empathy? Please, number one, be genuinely curious about other people, not just to know them on the surface, but to know them genuinely. You want to connect with people, the ability to develop rapport. Who really is this person I've been working with for so long? How are you doing? Where do you come from? What do you like? How do you spend the weekend without being intrusive? But be curious. It opens you up. It does more than just inform your mind. It opens up your subconscious, your psyche, to embracing others and not just seeing them as objects. And when you do this, honestly, most people open up to you. But remember, this is cognitive empathy. It doesn't mean you will be manipulated because you are doing it at another level. Be genuinely curious about other people. Number two, practice active listening. This is a very wide one. This is a leadership skill that we really focus on when we talk to, and we're not talking about the basics of communication skills. We're talking about leadership communication skills. It's an advanced level and very different. Listening actively gives us insight beyond the obvious. In our negotiation skills class, I remember one expert said that the ability to listen is to hear that which has not been said. You are picking cues that the person doesn't even know they are given. And it gives you insight into managing people, making decisions, and negotiating on the table in ways that people will wonder, how did you arrive at that? Practice active listening. Let me jump to number 4. Avoid stereotypes. It blocks active listening. This is who this person is. I've made up my mind. So no matter what they do, I'm interpreting them based on who I believe they are, not what they are projecting or who they are trying to be. In one book of the Bible, God said, it was said that God has answered them according to the idol in their hearts. So they have preconceived idea in their minds. So they are asking God and praying to God, but they have a fixed idea of what the answer might be. And so even when God is trying to answer alternatively, they can't see it. They can't see it. If God speaks loudly and say, this is my answer, they say, no, I bind you, old devil, get out. Until they get precisely what they want. So God said, I have answered them according to the idol in their hearts. And another scripture says, he answered them, he gave them meat, but he sent leanness, and they began to die. They got what? May we not get what you want that is contrary to what God wants for us. Avoid stereotypes. Avoid, be open-minded. Don't make up your mind. An open-minded person is always curious and willing to learn and weighing so many things. And the more we practice this, the more it becomes a part of us. It doesn't take time. It doesn't take time. Then develop perspective taking, which is the ability to see the other person's angle. When we practice these things, we will develop major competences in emotional intelligence. There are many others, but for the sake of time, and because I feel that we should be able to take a few questions if our coordinators feel it's still in order, I'll pause at this place. My name again is Kunle Adefila, and I'm the lead consultant of KGL Prime Consult, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Any questions or contributions from the house?
So much. This is Mr. Frank, being a colleague. Thank you so much.
Relationships. How do you know or sincere? And I'll say this: you have many things. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Why? Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So I was saying that typically you want to see if what they're saying matches with the value that they represent. And you would take note of this in different ways. One, from their body language. Have you ever seen where a person is speaking and somebody says, I can't put my finger to it, but I think it's insincere. I feel there's something wrong. So oftentimes people are not aware. Through their body language, they betray their real thoughts. And that is why in empathetic communication, we teach leaders how to understand and interpret body language, because a lot of people give off a lot of communication through their body language more than they think they are. So observe their body language and also look at their values that they say they stand for. Look at it and what they are saying today. Check out for consistency in everything they are doing, what they are saying, what they say they represent, what they want to achieve. Check out for consistency. It will take keen observation, but if you practice this over time, it will become instinctive at a point in time. That immediately you can put your finger on it and say, no, there's something wrong here. And I'm sure you've met people like that. They just say, no, I'm not going ahead with this, there's something wrong. They developed it over time. So start practicing it. Observe their body language, check out for consistency in their message, check if their values match what they are saying. You will be able to spot a flaw if there is one. I hope I've been able to answer that question. Any other one?
Any other
and then
question?
I will always say that don't jump as much as possible. Do your research. In business, just do your research.